Welcome to the Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge Masterclass, lesson number 3, sealing in your sketch. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Hope you're doing fantastic. Look forward to helping you with our next step of this monochromatic portrait, where we're going to actually apply some paint to the canvas. And we're going to start in preparation, though, with a couple of different steps before we can actually do the initial blocking in process, and that's what I want to show you today. We're transitioning out of the sketch. We finished that in our last lesson. I've seen many of your sketches in the group. They're looking fantastic. I'm just so pumped with the amount of detail you put in, especially in the map area, the accuracy of the forms. You've really showed the gesture of this man praying, communicating, with the angle of his head, the expression in his face, the way his hands are resting underneath his chin, the wrinkles in the clothing, and all these different things. You've done such a great job rendering the form and just capturing the essence of this image. I want to applaud you for that and say thank you for the effort you put in. Well, if you haven't taken the portrait painting challenge, you can do that. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, it's not too late to join. You can join at realisticacrylic.com/acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. Also have the link in the description of the video and in the top comments. When you join, I'll send you the reference photo. You'll be able to paint with us here. You'll have the gridded reference photo, the welcome kit with all the supplies you need, your shopping list to be able to paint along with us. So go ahead and join the challenge. It's completely free, and we'd love to have you take part. Before I begin this lesson, though, I'd like to begin with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started, because I do need God's help to be able to paint, and I'd like to invite you in the process and also ask a blessing on you as well. So, Father, I come before you in Jesus' name, and I pray, Lord, that you would bless this painting session. And Lord, I pray you'd encourage the students to continue with the process, even if it was challenging to do the sketch. I pray, Lord, that you would bless them in Jesus' name and just let them experience, Lord, more of your presence. And Father, I pray that you would enable them to be able to sketch with confidence, or do the sealing in process with confidence, and transition into the painting portion, just knowing that you can help them to do this, Lord. Help me to be able to teach this well, Lord. And if anybody needs healing from any joint pain or anything that would prevent them from painting, I pray you'd heal them in Jesus' name. And I pray, Lord, that you would be with us as we paint. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we're going to begin the actual process of putting paint to canvas. Now, this is just preparatory. Our first step is to add a white layer of paint to certain portions of the canvas. I just call this whiting out the grid lines. And we need to do that at this stage before we actually seal in the sketch. And the reason for that is because if you seal in the sketch without whiting out the grid lines first, inevitably a little bit of the pigment of the colored pencil mixes into the matte medium that we use to seal in the sketch. And that can actually then put a little bit of a grayish tint over the whole thing, which would then cause your white paint to not match. And you're going to see all the areas where you're trying to white out the grid lines. Now, we do want to white out the grid lines, especially in the lighter areas, because being that we're doing this with the acrylic glazing technique, we don't want those lines to show through. Okay, so for our first step, just take some white paint. You can put it in a little container like this. This is a little condiment container. And we're just going to take a 1/2-inch flat brush, or this is actually a little smaller than that. This is a size 6. And we just begin to white out some of these grid lines. And let's zoom in here just a bit so you can see the canvas a little closer. And what we'll do then is just dip it into the paint and start on the left corner, usually in the top, and just work our way over to the right, so we're not actually smearing any of our sketch as we go along. And what I'd like you to do is just go over the grid lines and smooth them out. We want to get a nice even application of paint. Now this paint's a little bit thicker, If yours happens to be not quite this thick, that's okay. I use Nova Color, but this paint is just kind of, well, it's not dried out over time, but it's just gotten a little thicker. It's some older paint that's been in the container for a while. It's still very workable. If you have Liquitex or any paint out of the tube, it'll look like this. It'll be this kind of buttery consistency here. But if it's more fluid, you might just have to use a couple more layers. And so when you're applying this, you want to really smooth it out. Let's show you here. So you don't see any actual texture on the canvas. All right, so when you apply it initially, it will be kind of almost pasty looking, but just really smooth that out, and that'll help. And that way, then, like I said, you're not going to have any of these kind of rough brush marks that you're going to have to try to compensate later. Now, technically, we don't even have to white this out because this is going to be a little darker. Any areas that are going to get darker, like the bottom area down here, his vest, his pants, that's almost black in value. It's a very dark gray. We really don't have to white those areas out. It's really the areas that are a medium gray or lighter that we need to white out. So technically, I didn't even have to do that up there. That's just bonus, I guess. This area, borderline, I guess I'll just do that quick. We'll just hit that with one layer. It's not a big deal. And look how I'm holding the brush. I'm almost scrubbing it onto the canvas surface. If you want, you can just spray the paint a little bit to make it slightly more fluid, and then just use the heel end of a brush or something to stir it. That does help it to apply just a little bit better. So I just sprayed that with a slight mist of water. I'll show you this here, what that looks like when I'm stirring it. Just get the lumps out. So I'm just finding it a little bit too tacky to work with. Don't mix any matte medium with this, and make sure you're using titanium white paint, not gesso. You could use gesso if that's what you have, but it's a little more translucent. It doesn't cover as well, so it would take you many layers of gesso to actually cover over this properly. Now here we definitely want to use the white as we're going over this area, which is that opening in the window. And again, I want to make sure I get the brush work out, because in this technique, we're moving very smoothly. We want the surface to be actually quite smooth. So work all that brush texture out. And now let's continue on. We're going to look for any other areas where we should apply this. Yeah, we'll add it to this part of the curtain too, just so that we don't see those grid lines. They don't get in the way of the presentation of the painting. So you can tell we're really kind of scrubbing that into the surface, and that will really make sure it covers it nicely and you don't have to do several layers. So we'll continue on here, scrubbing. When I say scrubbing, I just mean we're really pushing that paint into the weave of the canvas. You do use quite a bit of pressure, and you're holding that brush almost perpendicular to the surface of the canvas, and then you ease up with the pressure to smooth it out. Yeah, so technically here, I probably don't need to cover these grid lines, but I'm just going to do it anyway, because you might have your grid lines a little darker than I had. Just in case, we'll just cover that. Now let's work over his shoulder area, and we're just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see that better. And we will go over this part of the back of his sleeves. The vest really doesn't need it. That's quite dark. So I'm not going to even bother with that. The value is just so dark, you're really never going to see these lines. They're going to get covered up. And even here, they probably will too. Down here in this area of the painting, I'm not going to bother. It's quite dark. But anywhere where the values get a little lighter, like right here on this part of the sleeve, maybe they get light enough, but even still, it'll probably be covered. Up here, I'm going to hit it. So try to not go over your sketch, because if you do, it could get a little muddy. And if you end up not getting all the grid lines covered, that's fine. So you have a little bit in here that I can do. Let's see. His face is very, very dark. It's very much in shadow, so it really isn't necessary to cover it there. I will do the highlighted portion. Here we have to be careful. Let's use a small round brush for that. I'm actually going to come back to that later. The pages of the Bible, we can hit that part because there's a little bit of a grid line that intersects there. The table is light enough in value. We do want to cover that as best as we can. And so when you're going over these grid lines, try not to just paint over the grid lines only, like, just making an X shape. Try to actually paint around them and through them. Look how I'm painting over like almost the whole surface of the table, and I'm brushing horizontally. That'll help it to blend better. So you don't have like just these weird vertical and horizontal lines that are the same width as your brush. All right, so we just kind of fill in these areas. And again, if you miss a few spots, not a big deal. Eventually it's going to get covered up anyway. We just want to minimize some of the work we'll have to do later. So don't feel like, oh, I have to do this just perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just do it as best as you can, and it's going to all work out, especially if you're praying and trusting God will help you, and He will. So we're just, again, going over these lines. I'm going to do what I can do with this brush, and then eventually I will end up switching to a smaller round brush. Now let's do this area here. And you might notice too, because I'm noticing that with mine, we have just a little bit of the pigment mixing in. So I have just a little bit of a grayish color as some of the residue is mixed in here. I can see that. And so that's kind of a new development. I really haven't encountered that with this process in the past. Let's be honest with you. And I think maybe it's because of the color that I'm using, this particular pigment here for this colored pencil. So we have just a little bit of a grayish hue almost as it's mixed in a bit. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time, you might see that, but we can definitely overcome it. You might have to actually apply one more layer to do that. Let's just make sure we get all the brush work out. Now you'll probably, whatever brush you use will be a workhorse for this, and it's going to end up really kind of messing up your brush. So don't use the best brush for this. Maybe just a lower end brush that's still in decent shape where the bristles aren't all splayed out. Yeah, so as I apply this, I just realized it's added a little bit of a grayish tint. You might not be able to see that here on the video, but you might notice it in your own image. Yeah, just a little bit of a grayish tint there as it's picked up some of the pigment. So again, I'll probably have to go over it. I'll have to go over it again with one more layer after this dries. We do want to let it dry completely. Now this kerosene container, don't go over that because everything is dark. The shadows under the table, maybe we can hit this one a little bit. This is in shadow enough, that's not going to matter. So I'm not going to be concerned about that. The interior of the lamp, we can do that. fill that in. Yep. So again, it's just gotten a little bit grayish. So that's okay. We'll find a way to work through this. Probably again, we'll just be adding another layer over the whole thing after it dries. And I think that will help. The nice thing is this is monochromatic, so we don't have to worry so much about losing the chromatic intensity of anything. We just want to make sure that, you know, we have our values as constant as we can. Now let's switch to a smaller round brush. So something like this. This is a 5/0 round brush. You could use that. You could use a 1/0 brush. Anything that'll give you a good amount of control. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be really small. This is a size 3. That could work too. Any round brush will give you a decent amount of control. And then we're going to just go over some of these smaller areas. So for example, like on his face, we'll just add a little bit of a highlight to a few spots there. Don't have to worry so much about the wrist. Again, that's going to be in shadow. Hand, that'll be in shadow. Some of these lighter areas of the shirt, you might want to do that. So as you're going over these areas, again, try not to hit any of the parts and smear the sketch with your paint. Now, if you do, it's not the end of the world. I just want to let you know and encourage you, if you have any areas where this white mixes with the sketch and, you know, you're like, oh, what's going on? It's starting to get kind of grayish and, you know, muddy looking as it's mixing and smearing the sketch. Don't worry, because we'll be able to overcome any of these issues with the paint. And the main thing is just to have the sketch as a foundation. It doesn't have to look perfect. So don't be concerned about that. Again, this is kind of a new development for me, seeing, you know, some of the grayish tint that's happened here, but I'm not concerned about it. I know God will help us to overcome it. And it's just part of the process. All right, so now we're going to just go into the map area, and let's zoom in there, and we're going to go over any of the grid lines that need to be gone over. So in the middle here, we can add a little bit of the white, and we don't have to get everything. A little bit on this map. Well, some of that needs to be there, so don't white over the actual hemisphere lines in the map. This is a grid line. Just go over the grid lines like right here and here. But this vertical line and then this other one actually should be there. That's part of the detail of the map. So I'm not going over everything. Okay. All right, so I think we have this down pretty well, and I might then go over, I might go over this one more time. I'm going to let everything dry and zoom out and show you what's going on. So a little bit of smearing, not too bad, but we're going to go over this one more time and just whiten this up, especially this wall. But it's going to be okay, because eventually we're going to be getting semi-opaque with the painting anyway. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to continue on, and we're going to add another layer, and then eventually we'll seal this in. So I'm just going to let this dry, and we'll be right back in a bit. All right, I'm just using a blow dryer to dry this out. So you definitely can do that too if you'd like. If you want to use a blow dryer, just to speed up the process, it'll make it a lot easier for you. You don't have to wait and wait. So now that this is dry to the touch, just make sure that feels completely dry. I'm going to put another layer on top. I also rinsed out my brush just to get any of that colored pencil pigment out of it. And now we're just using more of this fresh white. Now the main thing I want to do is go over the white part of the wall. I'm not so concerned about this curtain because that's going to get gray anyway. So even though it looks kind of visually not the best to have a couple of these darker spots, it's okay. And if you're curious, when I zoom in, you should be able to see what I'm talking about. These kind of discolored areas, but you're going to see that a lot more prominently, like on the wall and then in the lamp and those kind of areas there. So we're going to remedy that and then just go over this, like I say, with another layer. And I think I do need to just get this paint a little more fluid. Let's just add a bit more water to the mix. I just sprayed it with my palette. And we'll just apply this again and go over the whole thing. And then that'll add that extra luminosity that we need here, that extra bump in value. Yeah, you'll have to make your paint a little more fluid for this to work, because otherwise it's just too difficult to brush it when it's thick and minimize that texture. Even though it's fluid, it's still going to cover very nicely. All right, we'll go over the lamp, get that a little bit lighter too. If you have too much on your brush, you might have to just spread it around a little bit. All right, we'll just continue with this. Right, and we'll add a little bit to the top of the lamp, and we're just brushing around, again, using a lot of pressure, really smoothing this out. There we go. Yeah, so that does help quite a bit. And we can add a little bit to the table as well. Just go over that one more time, especially in this area where it's going to be lighter. So other areas aren't quite as important. Sometimes you have to turn your brush over to get some of the paint that's on the other side off the bristles and onto your canvas. All right. So that's much better. That's much better now. I feel much happier about the wall. It's really restored that luminosity by going over it with a second layer. And now I feel everything is pretty well sealed in. We'll just hit this area down here. Just get the last remnants of paint off the brush. Yeah, so overall I feel really happy about this. And again, you know, if there's any areas that got missed, no big deal. Especially if they're lighter values, we're going to be going over them with titanium white or a really light gray. So no big deal. I think this is all going to work out. And so the next step here, after we let this dry, and we do need to let it dry for maybe about half an hour. Again, you can use a blow dryer on the low setting and just hold it about 6 to 12 inches away from the canvas to dry it off a little faster. But you can work on another project or, whatever you need to do. Let this dry for a half an hour. And then after that's completely dry to the touch, then you'll be able to go ahead and seal the sketch in. So I want to show you how to do that. But again, make sure it is completely dry to the touch, because this paint we apply could be a bit thicker. And depending on the humidity levels where you live, it could take less or more time to dry. So 30 minutes to even an hour of time, or you use a blow dryer, and you should have it completely dried within maybe 5 minutes, and it'll be ready for the sealing in step. All right, so I will see you in that step there. All right, and now for this next step, what we'll want to do is we're going to pre-seal the canvas. So the first thing is to take your canvas off of your easel, and what you're going to do is set it flat on a table. So you're going to want to take it off your easel, set it flat on a table, put something over the table if you don't want your table to get covered with matte medium spray. Just cardboard or newspaper, or drop cloth, whatever you have. And then you're going to take some matte medium, and I already have this pre-mixed right here. Let's see, I'll show it to you on the camera. Everything's kind of in reverse here, so. But you're going to want to take a little bit of matte medium, maybe about 25% matte medium to 75% water. And go ahead then and put that into a little spray container like this. And I actually have this pre-mixed, and because I have a cap on this, just kind of a nice tip for you, because I have a cap on it, that prevents this from actually drying out on the nozzle. So I put this cap on when I'm done, and the nozzle doesn't dry and it doesn't clog up. So I can actually keep this spray wet indefinitely. So just a little tip for you. You can mix it up once and then reuse this. But again, 25% matte medium, 75% water approximately, and put it into a little container like this, little spray bottle. You can get these at dollar stores, Hobby Lobby, places like that. And then what you're going to do is just pre-seal this canvas. And if you were to just brush over the canvas with a brush, what could happen is you could end up lifting up some of the colored pencil or graphite, whatever you used. You'd end up lifting your sketch and disturbing the sketch, smearing it and obliterating some of the detail. So this will actually seal this in nicely. Now, some people ask, well, can I just use a spray fixative like you get at the store for different things? You could, but I do not recommend it. I've seen people that have used spray fixatives, and then it causes problems where the paint won't adhere, starts to peel away, or it just goes over really strangely and rough. I don't recommend spray fixatives, and I'm not a fan of chemicals and spraying things in my studio that I have to breathe in. And I don't always get the opportunity to spray things outside because it's winter here in Wisconsin, like 6 months out of the year. So I like to do things that are non-toxic that I can always do in my studio. So for that reason, we're going to spray this onto the canvas first. And it's just pretty easy to do. Just going to basically go like this and just spray that a few different times. And we're just keeping this about 6 to 8 inches away from the surface of the canvas, and just pump, pump, pump. And it's just going to saturate the surface. You don't have to really get it too wet, but just enough to kind of pre-seal everything in. We don't want to have like huge puddles on here. We just want to have kind of a stippling effect of everything being covered. So if you kind of look at it in the light and you see kind of a stippled effect on it, and I'm just kind of bending down here and looking at it, and you just see it's kind of pockmarked, like the texture of a roller when you're rolling paint on your wall. It's good. So you can then just let that dry, and that should be enough to pre-seal that. and then prevent your canvas from really getting messed up when you actually apply the matte medium with a brush. So just let this dry for another half an hour. You can use a blow dryer to speed up the process if you'd like, and then we'll go ahead and we'll apply the matte medium with a brush. You can just let this sit here. So I'll see you in that next step. All right, and we have everything dried here. So we pre-sprayed it in with that matte medium water mixture, and it's completely dry to the touch. You want to verify that, look at it, make sure there's no spots that are light. And then our next step is to actually seal it in with a brush. So we're going to use some matte medium that we have here. Make sure it is matte medium. You don't want to use gesso. So just show this to you. Matte medium, Liquitex, Nova Color, Golden. I haven't used Golden. I can't verify the quality. I've heard it's good. But Liquitex and Nova Color I have used, and I know it works very, very well. So you don't want any other kind of mediums, retarding mediums, gloss medium, extender mediums. Make sure you're using matte medium. And so you put some of that into a container. Just have this in this condiment container like this, and we're good to go. And we have a 1-inch brush. Now, if you have a 3-inch brush, that works even better. Something like this would actually work best, but I don't think I have that on the supplies list. And a lot of people don't have them, but they almost always have a 1-inch brush on hand. So I'll just demonstrate with that. And dip that into the container like this. And just make sure it's difficult to do this in reverse. I had the camera kind of flipped in a different way. Dip that in, and then we're going to just start from the top and work our way down to the bottom. So starting kind of away from you and then working toward you. All right, so we do have a little bit of smearing going on. So let's try something different. What we're going to do is cover this whole thing, and that will minimize the smearing. So it's possible that I didn't have enough matte medium on the surface of my, I might have not sprayed it thick enough. This will minimize the smearing. If you use a large, copious amount of matte medium and just kind of squirt it on there, and then you can brush it out afterwards. And this will basically coat your bristles and really minimize that smearing that can happen. Now, I'm going to recommend that you spray that canvas maybe with 2 layers of the pre-spray, just to minimize this from happening. I haven't encountered this before with the other pigments. It just must be this particular pigment that we're using. So I'm brushing it in a couple of different directions to minimize that. I guess things sometimes can happen that are a little unexpected. So I'm just going to use a very light amount of pressure. But I am going to recommend, just to minimize this, that you use a couple of different layers, 2 different layers of the pre-spray, and that should prevent this from happening. Okay, I'm gonna use this larger brush just to kind of smooth this out. I'm going to brush in a couple different directions so I don't have smearing kind of occurring all in one direction here. And a little bit of smearing. All right, so just smooth this out. Don't want to overbrush it. All right, so I'm going to do some diagonal brush strokes and just try to minimize this a little bit. Yeah, so we might end up having just a little bit of a grayish tint over the whole thing. So if you get past the initial shock value of smearing your sketch, what we're ending up doing is actually giving us kind of a nice gray tone to work with. You just have to trust that God will help you in the process, even if unexpected things happen. So I'm doing vertical strokes, horizontal strokes, but you can see my sketch remains. It hasn't been lost. I'm just getting kind of a grayish tone over the whole thing, which isn't bad. It isn't bad at all to have kind of a grayish tint. And this is going to actually be a nice mid-tone to work out of. What I want to do is just get a little better blend. I'm going to wipe off my brush a bit. And we're going to smooth this out. Just try to distribute this pigment a little bit more. Yeah, this is a little different than what I expected, but this will be okay. I'm using some very light strokes over the whole thing to smooth it out. You can still see my sketch. It has not been lost. Yeah, it's going to look a little streaky, but once we get the paint on there, it'll all work out. It'll all work out. All right. I think that's about as smooth as we're going to get it. So, as you can see, a little bit scary. It was a little bit scary for a bit, but you know, I pray before I paint, and I just trust that even in the middle of these challenges, God is going to work it all out. So we're going to let this dry, and I'm going to just chat with you a little bit more about this here, and that'll finish up this lesson. All right, so this is what we have here after our challenging process of sealing in. That caught me by surprise. I'm just going to be honest with you. I did not expect the colored pencil pigment to be disturbed by my brushwork, even after I pre-sealed it in. I think it's just a different kind of pigment with that dark gray that's never happened with the other pigments. So it was a challenge that I believe God helped me to overcome. I believe He'll help you to overcome any challenges that arise in your process of sealing in. But learn from my mistake. Okay, I would encourage you to spray 2 or even 3 of these pre-seal layers on here before you actually do the sealing in process of applying, matte medium with the brush. And it might seem like a lot of preparatory work, but it's worth it. Just so you wouldn't encounter something like this. If you still have some bleed through of your colored pencil pigment being disturbed by the matte medium, then just do what I did, and I would encourage you to brush it out vigorously, but using very light sweeping brush strokes. However, I really would not want you to have to encounter that. It is a little bit of a challenge getting that brushwork just right with the diagonal and vertical strokes to smooth it out, and end up with something that looks decent like this, where we have a nice mid-tone to work out of. I was actually envisioning doing some sort of a muting layer mid-tone over the whole thing anyway. If you don't encounter this kind of smearing on yours, we're still going to have a little bit of a gray value to work out of. So it's okay that it's a little bit darker. And as I hold up this white card, you can see how much darker it is than than that. Not a whole lot darker, but again, it's going to give us a mid-tone to work out of, so we can add some highlights to it. We can add some darker values. And since this is monochromatic, it's going to work a whole lot better for that kind of process. So this will work. We're going to make this work. And I'm going to actually encourage you to add some sort of a muting or toning layer to yours. And I think I'll be able to demonstrate that, even though I have that on mine in our next lesson. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. This is a portrait painting challenge. So we're going to have challenges in the process, but I'm committed to help you overcome any of these challenges. And with God's help, I'll overcome the challenges as well. And we're going to finish this painting with excellence. And we believe God is going to help us to do it. So I thank God that he was able to help me rescue this, because I was a little concerned about it, but he worked it all out for good. So just like he promises to work everything together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Anyway, want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts about the process, any questions you have, and I look forward to helping you with this portrait. In the next lesson, we're going to actually do a sealing or a muting layer. We're going to do a muting layer now that it's all sealed in. And then we're going to actually begin the painting process, the blocking in. So I look forward to teaching you that in our next lesson. For now, though, God bless you, and look forward to teaching you again. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good rest of your day.